What is going on, everybody? This is your boy Brooks from Hear Me Out podcast, and today I have with me, I'm going to call it the breakdown segment of Hear Me Out. And today I have Katherine Fominykh from the Capital Gazette and the Baltimore Sun Media Group. Katherine, what's up? How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Glad to have you here. Now, Katherine, for those that don't know, again, you're a sports journalist from the Capital News Gazette, part of the Baltimore Sun Media Group as well. Could you just let the people know what your job is, how long you've been doing it, how you got started in journalism?
I've been with the Capitol for almost 3 years. And it's part of the Sun. So I started interning for the Sun, and then they created a job for me at the Capitol so I could stay on because I basically begged to stay on. But yeah, I've been doing that for the last 3 years. I mostly do high schools. I usually do Navy a lot, but with the pandemic being weird and high school sports being a lot, I've done less Navy lately, and also there's been less Navy lately.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of jumped into Maryland a bit recently. And before that, I came from the Globe because I started as an intern there and then stayed on for a little while in Boston. And I had fully intended to go back to Boston, and it just didn't work out that way, which is good because I can't afford Boston.
So two follow-ups for that question, or two follow-ups for what you just said there. So did you grow up in Boston?
No, I'm from Towson. So I went out to Boston for school because I wanted to be near the Red Sox, and
Right.
that's basically most of the reason. And then also Emerson was a good school.
You're a Red Sox fan, and you're from Towson. You're from Baltimore
Yeah,
County.
my mom raised me as a Red Sox fan.
Oh
So
my gosh,
yeah, I
traitor.
would say like less so lately, not because, I'm leaving my team, but because I don't know. It's so different when you're like full-time sports journalist. You feel
Right.
like you're kind of less of a fan, especially if you've covered teams. It feels like a little different.
Yeah, it definitely does. So
Yeah.
with that being said, being at or going to school in Boston, I know I saw in your bio that it said that you're from a sports crazed town. Also being from Baltimore County, how do you really stack it up? Like who's more crazy, who's more toxic, would you say? Like, are they the same? How would you really judge it?
All I'll say is that when I wore Red Sox shirts to school, besides the ridicule of my classmates, I had a physics teacher whose daughter worked for the Orioles, and he would use me to demonstrate arc and distance. And so he would use me literally for target practice when I would wear my Red Sox shirts. Like I would be the example. So, I mean, it probably says a little bit right there.
Right.
All the kids in the class would get extra credit on Purple Fridays and Orange Fridays, but I was not well behaved as a child, so I would wear my Red Sox gear, and
Mm-hmm.
like they would make a point to give all the other kids credit
Oh
except
my
for me.
gosh.
But
Jeez, what?
that said, Boston, I mean, it's not, it depends on if you're at a game where there's a lot of college students or not, because the college students, they're very transient, so they're not really as into it as
Mm-hmm.
like the lifelong Boston folks are. So it really depends on like what kind of crowd you have that night.
Gotcha. So are you a Patriots fan as well then?
Yeah, well, okay. So I became a Patriots fan, but I'm also of the same mind where I think it's very funny when Patriots fans are upset.
Right.
So I'm not sure what that says about me, but because it's especially when it's like a ridiculous level of upset where they're like mad that Tom Brady's playing for the Bucks or whatever, because I think that's
What were
hysterical.
your reactions to Tom Brady leaving? What did you think of him getting that seventh ring? Because he's got more rings now than a whole franchise, two franchises.
Uh, I just hope that he's like, I don't know, he's changed. His diet is so ridiculous. It's hard to like see him as like a regular football player because just
Right.
everything about him is just so insane. I mean, I remember we got like a copy of his book when I was at the Globe, and he like drank like 2 liters of water a morning or something, which is just insane. But I don't know. I mean, I think the Patriots could like use having a different face for a little while, even if it takes them a little while to figure out what that is.
So keep Cam Newton, or what are you thinking?
Mm, someone new. I don't know who that might be. Finally draft like a quarterback that can actually play in the NFL would probably be a good idea. Or if you
Right.
have one, like Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe don't give him up.
Yeah, that was a weird situation there for sure. I mean, from what I
Yeah.
understood, it just seemed like Tom Brady was scary about someone coming up and
And
potentially
he should
taking
have
his
been,
spot.
because that's exactly how he got his spot, was that he was the really good one coming up, and he took, he waited, I don't want to say he waited, but he took the spot, quarterback getting injured, and his career, goes from there. So
That's crazy.
I don't blame him, but yeah, it is
It
what
is
it
what it
is.
is, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward from your Towson, Maryland, but Boston sports upbringing. Um, so you mentioned the fact that you covered Navy, but then now you're doing Maryland sports. Of course, right now the situation is crazy as far as the pandemic going. You got to do certain protocols. For you, what was it like covering Maryland sports? Having to wear a mask every day, doing the Zoom calls, all of that.
Well, so in some ways it was, not to say it's nice, because I feel sorry for the winter high school athletes that didn't get a season. I would have loved to see them, but them not playing gave me the chance to go kind of full on with Maryland women,
Hmm.
which I probably wouldn't have gotten to do if there had been high school games every night. So I mean, in that sense, it actually kind of worked out, as far as getting to cover Maryland. But I mean, I always felt pretty comfortable at Maryland. I can't say the same for every school I've ever been to. They were really good with protocols. They did a really good job of like spacing out, when staff would get there, when media would get there, and all the media was always spaced out. I got so by the time I was at Maryland, I was just so used to wearing masks, because I worked out in the field all summer during the pandemic. Even though there weren't games, there was still lacrosse tournaments, there were still baseball tournaments, there were still protests and rallies. So I had to go out, and frankly, it's better to be in an environment where everyone has a mask on and you don't go anywhere near the athletes, versus a game where literally no one has a mask on in the middle of the summer. So I mean, I would take that over anything. But I guess I was lucky in the sense that I got to cover a really good team,
Yeah, for
because they
sure.
made it interesting, and they definitely made the, doldrum winter months go a lot faster, because they were just so much fun. They were
So
so much
who
fun.
out of the whole team, obviously there's like Ashley, there's Angel who I've spoken to, Mimi Collins. Just out of the whole team, who was the most fun for you to interview, to talk to? Who had like the biggest personality that just made Zoom conferences more fun?
So I only got a couple of them one-on-one, but I will say that any press conference that Chloe Bibby was in, like, she's just so lively, and she would just give the best quotes. Like, she was, I mean, I actually, like, because we have our mute buttons on, but I would laugh sometimes, like when she would say things, because I mean, she was just, she always, and you can tell, especially in, like the later it went, I feel like she really, like, her personality just popped every single time she was in a press conference. And Faith Masonis was also great. Like, she wouldn't get too many, as opposed to some of the starters, but when she was, especially after that Alabama game, I mean, she was just on fire. um Angel would be great, and you can especially tell, like, later on, as Angel was, feeling better, and you had a couple more games back, she really started to get her confidence back. I mean, they were all so sweet. Like, especially like Ashley, like, she's such a, like, like, she could battle anybody on the floor, but when you talk to her, she's just like the sweetest, like, most humble person in the room. So
For sure. So wow, you got pretty lucky there, because for me, in my experiences, some people are real businesslike in the press conferences. They give you a couple word answers, but
mm.
is it safe to say that there weren't many people that were just businesslike and didn't want to say too much to the media and whatnot?
No, because I think they were all really proud of themselves, and they, like, especially because a lot of us, would ask them about each other. And they love talking about their teammates, because you could just really feel how much they really respected and enjoyed being with their teammates. So I think that, really brought out, like, I don't know, especially as later into the season, it was kind of the same, like, I don't know, maybe six reporters kept showing up. So we kind of were a little more familiar, I guess, to the point where, we weren't asking the same questions over and over again. We could, knew a little bit more about them, could ask more specific questions, and, they could give more specific answers. So that was definitely helpful.
Okay. So, with that being said, obviously, they collapsed kind of late there in the Sweet 16 against Texas. Just from your standpoint of covering the team the whole season, was that last minute stretch there like totally uncharacteristic of them? Because Obviously, they're the leading team in the nation for scoring, and they ended up going away from that. How strange was that performance from them in the Sweet 16?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, in the fourth quarter, at least. I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, it was really like, I mean, to be honest, it was kind of after the first quarter, like the second quarter, it felt like, okay, this is okay, but like they need to pick it up. Like I talked to a friend at halftime and I was saying like, I don't like this. Like, and she was like, they're up right now. And I'm like, I don't like it. Like it's too close. And on one hand, I was thinking like, well, I mean, you get this deep in the tournament, they're not all going to be blowouts. Like they're going to start getting close, but it just felt off. I mean, it reminded me of the Ohio State regular season game earlier in the season, where like pretty early on, you just kind of have that feeling of like, unless something really dramatic happens, this is not good. I mean, even like the first round, the Big Ten tournament against Nebraska, it was really kind of similar to that, where like shots were just not falling the way that they should have been. And if Ashley hadn't broken out the way that she did at the end of that Nebraska game, they would have lost that game more than likely. So it just felt a lot like that. I mean, Texas was good. I just would have really liked to see Maryland, have a better night. Part of it is that they just played so many games towards the end of the season, which is really not something they did the whole season. They had long breaks in between their games, whether because of COVID or just because of scheduling, or other teams had COVID, or a certain team didn't want to come because of the inauguration, so there was just a lot of different reasons why they had, longer breaks. And then the last week of the season, they had 3 or 4 back-to-back games. And then the whole Big Ten tournament was back-to-back. And then I think it was just, for a team that a lot of whom were pretty inexperienced or pretty young, it was just a lot, and they're allowed to have an off night, but, you don't really want an off night in the tournament.
Right. I mean, it's one game, and one game can end it all. So
yeah, especially because I mean, you look at the Alabama game, the bench had 46 points, and then collectively they had like 6 against Texas. I mean, that's the game changer, because everyone's talking about bench. Like the bench is what, the Maryland starters are great, but their bench is what takes them to the next level. The fact that they're so deep and you don't have the bench scoring, and that's what's going to happen.
So after that surprising loss, how would you grade the Maryland season, and what are you looking forward to the most? Because they're gonna get Baby back and they get 2 other seniors back. What are your
They're getting all the
expectations?
seniors back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
I
getting all
mean,
their senior back.
yeah,
What do you
apparently, yeah.
expect for the season to be like next year?
If everyone comes back and everyone's healthy, then I think it would be just like this one, except better. I mean, I'm like a sports romantic. I always think like, certain seasons have magic or whatever. And there's like a certain, and you're not necessarily going to get the same thing, because for whatever reason, this season was magic. I mean, I know Brenda would always point to their resilience against the pandemic, and, maybe without that, they don't play as well, but I don't know. I mean, they're all going to have more experience. Like I said, if they're all together, they'll have Shanice Lewis back. Angel will be feeling a lot stronger. Zoe Young will be a lot stronger. I think you'll see her really open up the way that she wasn't really 100% this year back from her injury. So, you'll get to see her open up a lot more next year. And then you still have the same key players on the floor. I mean, Ashley will be a junior, Diamond will be a junior. You can't really put a price behind experience. And now they've all had NCAA experience. And I think that's going to show when they, play next year.
So you mentioned Brenda Freeze.
Mm-hmm.
She won her first and only title so far in 2006. Since then, the program has been super consistent as far as, winning conference titles, winning, at least 25 games a season, maybe 30. But it seems like she hasn't been able to break through. You know what I mean? We know she had a couple of Final Fours within this last decade, but what do you have to do? What does Brenda Freeze have to do in order to help this program get another title? Because
I
I
don't
spoke with a
know.
friend. I'm sorry. I was speaking with a friend, and she was mentioning how, the team has like the sauce or the juice. They just don't have the sauce right now. How do you get the sauce for this team?
I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be recruiting. I mean, UConn wins almost every year because UConn recruits not just the number 1 player in the nation, but, the rest of the top 10 under that, I mean, and then they just consistently keep getting it. I mean, Ashley's great. She wasn't number 1. She doesn't number 2. She's still one of the best players in the nation, but teams that win every year tend to be getting number 1 this year, the number 1 the following year, and then that previous number 1 still on the team. So it's just the best of the best at a high school playing for the same team. And when you have that kind of consistency, it is kind of hard for another team to break in. I mean, obviously that happened this year, but Stanford was also a lot more experienced. Arizona was a lot more experienced. Maryland was not as experienced. Obviously, the team that won in 2006 was pretty young too, but I don't know. I think the visibility that Maryland got from being as good as they were this year is going to really help with recruiting. I can think of a couple of girls from around here who have their eyes set on Maryland, but I mean, even across the country, I think that'll really help. And I think the higher recruits that they get coming to Maryland and coming to Brenda Freeze will definitely help in the long run.
Sure. And that's, as you mentioned, the fact that they don't get the number ones and the number twos all the time. And there's even a stretch where, players end up leaving the program. I can think of like Destiny Slocum from a couple of years ago, go back a little bit further, like Lexi Brown. For you, it always surprises me that players end up leaving this program because they end up always playing so well. Why do you think it happens sometimes when players just want to leave, especially with the transfer portal being so crazy right now?
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it, is that like more and more players are using the transfer portal to kind of, see what else is out there. I mean, I can't speak for why, players would want to leave, because I don't know, what they want. It could be more for playing minutes. Maybe they just want to see what else is out there. I think it's not exactly, I think it was shocking when Taylor Meisel left last year, because she just seemed like such a perfect fit in the program. But then again, Oregon was Oregon last year. Why wouldn't you want to play for Oregon, right? I don't know. I mean, I think it's just, players these days just really want to see what else they can do somewhere else. And I think we're going to see more and more of that going forward. But I do think that the kind of culture that was so evident on the team this year, of not just like we're good and we like playing together, but you have these girls talking about like the movies that they watch together afterwards. And like Zoe Young told me about like how they paint together and watch Netflix after. I mean, just like genuinely close behavior, like really seem to like really love each other. And I think that kind of environment keeps a team together, instead of having players bopping around to see what else they can do.
Do you think the closeness of this team was helped by the fact that like they had to stay on campus, they had to stay in a hotel together, they had no choice but to be around each other?
Definitely. I mean, they talked about that all the time. Like the fact that and you can see it because they never shut down, and that's not to say teams that did shut down for COVID, weren't, following the rules or whatever. I mean, stuff happens, but the fact that Maryland never shut down could show you how well they were sticking to their protocols. And a lot of that is sticking close together and really only spending time with each other. So yeah, that definitely helps. But I think you could sort of start to see it a little bit last year. I mean, they definitely had a similar kind of vibe, and, Ashley and Diamond are already close. And I think it just, that pandemic helped this year. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change next year, when hopefully they're a little more free.
Okay. So I just want to ask you this, and it's obviously is way too early. What do you see Maryland being able to do next year? Do you see them as a Final Four team, Elite Eight? What are you thinking?
Well, it's definitely early. And obviously UConn's going to be more experienced. I mean, they were already killer this year, and those were freshmen, and they're going to be even more dangerous next year, especially with their new additions.
Shout out to AZ Fudd.
Yeah.
Oh
Which hopefully I'll get to see her this summer. That'll be a fun story if I do get to see her training in Maryland. But yeah, I mean, they could be. And I think if they learn from their mistakes of this year, I think more consistent play. I mean, hopefully the pandemic is not still ruining games and, messing up the schedule. So I think more consistent play is really going to help them get used to back-to-back games. I think that's going to be a big deal. Obviously, you're not going to have Charlie Collier, ruining their day. So
right.
she'll be, ruining someone else's day in the WNBA. But I mean, I think they could be. I think they could. I mean, I think the Big Ten is going to look a little different next year just because of who's graduating and who's moving on. But Maryland should look the same. And I think that's going to play a big role. And, Brenda always says the Big Ten like helps them prepare for the tournament because it is one of the strongest conferences, them in the Pac-12. So hopefully I would like to see them go to the Final Four. I thought they were going to go this year, and I was extremely ready for it because I planned my whole schedule around it, but oh well.
So, and you just mentioned how great the Pac-12 is and the Big Ten. I mean, how insane was this NCAA tournament this year, especially with the Stanford and Arizona final? I think not many people were expecting Arizona at least to get to the championship game. But how great was this
No,
tournament?
I mean, even the NCAA wasn't, because they left Arizona out of their hype video. But I mean, it was just like, I mean, there were games that, I mean, I had no reason to be invested in, where like by the end, I'm like screaming and like cheering. And that Texas Tech I can't remember who they were playing, but that shot right at the end, the buzzer beater, that helped Texas Tech win. I can't remember who they were playing now, but like that was insane. Pretty much every Final Four, and obviously the national championship, and even the Elite Eight. I mean, Baylor UConn was insane and incredible, and that shouldn't have been as early as it was. It should have been the national championship game, although the national championship game was really good too. Yeah. So I mean, I don't actually know what happened in the men's tournament, really. I mean, I do, but I didn't really watch any of the games because the women's ones were so much better. And I basically, if the women weren't on, I needed a little bit of a break because they were so like intense.
Right.
Like I need to like have a palate cleanser for the night just to like calm down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the women's tournament was incredible. I don't even remember one that has been this good in as many years. Not that they weren't good, but like this one just seemed to be like every team was at their best this year.
And I'm glad that you brought up Baylor and UConn. If you were a ref, are you calling that foul on, or are you giving I can't remember her name right now. Dejanay Carrington. Are you giving Dejanay Carrington those free throws at the end of the game, or are you letting them just play it out?
I don't know, because I mean, it could have gone either way, and it's hard because it's like you call it that could give Baylor the win. You don't call it, UConn takes the win. So I think you would have had people angry regardless. I don't know if Gina would have made the same like off the wall comments in the post game, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't have called it, even though I was I thought it would be interesting if Baylor won, just because I think it's, as good as UConn was, and I really, really like this team this year. It's always kind of fun when like, the dynasty team gets knocked out, because it's, exactly. It's like, ooh, anybody can win at this point. So.
And that's exactly what I was telling my dad that same night, because he was surprised at me for rooting for Baylor. It's like, well, UConn is so good, Baylor just won a championship the year before. How can you be rooting for them? It's like,
yeah. Well, because I didn't think that Baylor, I don't know. I mean, I guess if they beat UConn, because the team that beat UConn did end up going all the way. But, I don't know. I didn't know if Baylor would make it to the end. But I rooted for Baylor in 2019 to win, because I was like, well, when I saw them beat UConn the regular season, I'm like, oh, that team's going to win the whole thing this year. And they did. So I felt very validated by that. And so I kind of like still felt like some loyalty to like the 2019 team in that game. But I mean, just the way they were playing against UConn for like a good chunk of that game was just so magic. But like almost every game towards the end was like that. There was just something about it that was just so crazy. For sure. Like the end of the South Carolina game, the Final Four was.
That was a killer right there. And I feel like South Carolina and Aaliyah Boston, they're going to be so excited and so properly just pissed off based off of that.
Well, they've gotten better like every year. I mean, even last year when they were predominantly freshmen, they were still like top 5. They were incredible. Right. And then obviously they're even better this year. And then, who knows next year. That's why I really want to see Maryland go up against them, because I think that would have been really good. I want to see Aaliyah Boston and Ashley Lucy go head to head. I mean, they have, but I mean, like now that they're more experienced.
So you mentioned the fact that Arizona versus UConn earlier, and how, Arizona's coach, Ada Barnes, she gives UConn, or not necessarily UConn, but just people that are fans of UConn, the double bird. What did you think of that? And like for her, because she's not necessarily intense, but she's just very transparent about how she feels. And, for a lot of women in sports, they're definitely not as respected as they should be. And they're told sometimes to just relax sometimes, and don't be so animated, blah, blah, blah. What did you think of that situation there, and that emotion that she got from her team?
Oh, I love that. Like, I love seeing like women, I mean, there are like stoic women, and I'm not saying that like every woman needs to be like super animated and do everything that the guys do. But if you are an animated person and you like to flip people off, or you lean into your emotions, then like that's what you should do. And you should get to do it just as much as like a male coach would get to do it, and no one would say anything otherwise. I mean, when Paige Beckers like ran by and slapped Gino on the butt during the Iowa game. That was hysterical.
That's
Like
great.
I love seeing that kind of stuff. I don't think anyone's ever gotten the chance to slap Gino before during a game, but I mean, I just love seeing stuff like that, especially as like more and more people are showing respect for the women's game, like getting to see like it be lively, not just with the basketball, but with everything. I mean, that's a lot of times you see like after an NBA game, I don't hear anything about the game, but I hear about the disrespectful dunk, where someone's sitting on someone else's face. So, it should get to have all of that,
For sure.
not along with the basketball.
And once again, shout out to the women's basketball tournament. Once again, man, the numbers for ratings were up. Everything was up, including the Final Four and the national championship game, especially, which is crazy because, again, we're in a pandemic year. People aren't necessarily going to go out and watch games, but people were excited to watch this. As Catherine said, man, some of the women's games, I mean, you could definitely make a case that the women's tournament was better as far as theatrics and dramatics and
Oh,
all
I would
that
say it was better than the
for the
men's.
men's
I mean, because
tournament.
like the teams that you kind of expected to go to the end of the men's went to the end of the men's, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it happens in the women's tournament a lot, but you know, there was a good finish to that Gonzaga Final Four game. But other than that, I can't point to anything that was more exciting in the men's tournament versus the women's.
Yeah, it's fair. So once again, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for talking about women's basketball and Maryland's women's basketball. So now I want to talk a little bit about just the fact that right now it seems like the acquisition of Baltimore Sun Media Group is kind of is teetering back and forth right now. It's not exactly sure what's going on. I know that there is a coalition of journalists, local journalists in Baltimore that want to help make Baltimore Sun kind of like a local, more of a local project, I guess you could say. For you, do you want to see it be owned by a corporation or do you want to see it be owned by the local people?
No, it needs to be owned locally. Because I've seen what Alden has done to other papers. I have friends who worked for papers under Alden's thumb, and most of them no longer work for those papers, not by their own choice. I would hate to see what would happen to this paper if it just got under even ownership that has a history of making papers smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think seeing how local owners have treated papers, I mean, the LA Times, owned by a single person, they flourished. I mean, I was like so jealous seeing all the hires they're making. I mean, and that's what we really need. I mean, we need, first of all, we need sports to expand. I mean, after my buddy Kyle leaves this month and Megan Woodward's already left, that literally leaves 3 non-editor BSMG sports reporters, between me, Bill Wagner, and Jacob Calvin Meyer. I mean, we're the only ones who aren't also editors. Not to say the editors don't work and cover games, because they do, but it needs to be a lot bigger than that. Even since I've been here, I think, including the Sun itself, maybe there's half as many sports reporters, half as many editors. And that's just not, that's not fair. I mean, I even tomorrow, there are a couple high school games that deserve coverage, should be covered. And, you got to make a decision. There's teams I would normally, and it's been weird. It's been a 4-week season, but, there's teams that I normally see 3, 4, 5 times in a season. I've seen them once because I can only be at, one place every night. And I think, local ownership would give, kind of give the voice back to, what's necessary around here, and not so much, what just fits, bottom dollar at the end of the day, which is not the most important thing with journalism. If you want to make money, you shouldn't own a newspaper. But
Right.
I'm optimistic. I have faith that things will work out the way that they're supposed to, and just because they don't work out quickly, it doesn't mean anything. I think if we learned anything in the pandemic, that you can't hope anything rushes. You just have to kind of wait and have faith that it'll work out.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said, for one, that Alden Group would really damage the Baltimore Sun, because it seems like that happens not only with them, but then you look at Vox and what's going on with like BuzzFeed and all that, and them downsizing their publication, and they're one of the more popular ones. We all know about the BuzzFeed quizzes, but then they're also putting out good work sometimes. So it's dangerous to, once again, like you say, kind of like prioritize money and making money off of advertisements and whatnot instead of just the stories, because at the end of the day, news shouldn't be worried about, views, AdSense, whatever it may be, because we're newsmen. We're supposed to be newsmen. We're supposed to be covering good stories.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
and
game stories, they don't get as many reads. I know that, but that's who cares? Like you have to cover the games. That like that's the point. Like you're supposed to highlight the athletes, and it shouldn't be so much focused on, well, no one's gonna, or not no one, but no one compared to a story that gets a lot of reads. Like only a few people are gonna read, like a few hundred maybe people are gonna read this story about some school beating another school in field hockey. And it's like, okay, it still happened though.
right.
Like it was still a good game. Like who cares? Like that's not really the point. So
And plus the thing is too, for these women, for these men, for these young women and young men, like them getting coverage means that they're going to go to college playing this sport or playing whatever else sport. So you can't just marginalize them because it's not going to make
no,
it's not going to get
no,
views.
it's so like I've had coaches tell me that like they've used articles and they send them to college coaches and that helps the kids like get offers from schools. And like, I mean, it's not like that's the whole point, but I mean, that's something that you want. If you don't have, there was a game I wanted to cover, previous Monday, but I had to cover another game. And it's like, we didn't see that team that day. And it's like, what if, one kid had like an explosive night? Oh, well, that didn't get covered. That's why it's like really important that, whoever takes over really focuses on sports, because sports does not get focused on enough. And it needs to get a little more love.
So, and you also mentioned the fact that, you were an intern at the Boston Globe. Did you see the same kind of issue with the sports section as far as, people not being able to go to games, or it's completely two
No, it's
different?
night and day. So I was what they call them hawks, all the high school reporters. You had so many that you would eat, all of you guys would do different sports per season. Like there would be maybe like 7 to 10 people at a desk a night, and like half of them would have been out in the field during the day. You would have like 2 or 3 people on just girls hockey alone. I mean, it was like you had basically the whole state covered on a day-to-day basis. You didn't miss the good games. I remember like Thanksgiving, they play football every Thanksgiving. And I think we had 20 people covering high school football games that day. I mean, and there would be a team of copy editors that would be like maybe 5 to 7 people on it, because I would help put together the paper too. So I would see like the copy editors at night. I mean, it was just a totally different. There would be editors meetings, and there would be like 4 like sports editors in a room. Like it's just totally different. And that was a much more functional setup in a lot of ways, because you had everything covered. I mean, there were different challenges, because if you have 2 other people also covering the same sport as you, it's going to be a lot harder for you to pitch a game you want to do or a story you want to do. But that's a personal thing that has nothing to do with like who's getting covered and like the appropriate coverage happening. Just completely different situation. Obviously they're locally owned by one person, so definitely a different situation.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just crazy to me. Just the once again, the difference between even here in the Washington Post, people will, or not here at the Washington Post, but here locally with the Washington Post, people complain about sports not getting covered as much. You got the WCAC, and they're getting covered every night because they're the WCAC. They're the best conference in the country for high school basketball and football. It's just a weird situation, and I wish it could get better. And again, it's just kind of like a local media kind of investment, I guess. So, wishing the best for Baltimore Sun, wishing the best for the media group, all the journalists. You mentioned Kyle Andrews. Kyle, great guy. Got a lot of love for him, and I know that's your buddy. So, you got any message for him as he moves on?
Oh, I mean, I don't think where he's going is public yet, but like he's gonna kill it. I mean, he deserves this for so long, and like it's exactly what he should be doing, and he's gonna absolutely like make a name for himself. I don't see. He's already got like a big platform. Like I don't know how is that big. I mean, he's got Adam Jones responding to all of his tweets, but he's so good at what he does, and the fact that he was still working so hard, during cancer and then during the pandemic, literally immediately afterwards. I mean, I don't know anyone who works as hard as Kyle does. He deserves everything that he's getting.
For sure.
Yeah.
Katherine, thank you so much once again for coming on to Hear Me Out podcast and the breakdown. Before I let you go, do you have anything else you want to say?
I don't know. It's been a really long day. I'm planning all of my high school games for the week, so I think I'm good.
All right. Well, once again, thank you for coming on, and we will see you soon. We are out. Bang. My guy or gal, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and share this video for the latest on sports, progressive politics, and pop culture.